All right, 2025, y'all. What a year. So good. Hey, if we haven't had the chance to meet, my name is Bryson Cook. I have the honor of serving as the campus pastor here at the Franklin campus. I want to just test with a show of hands here to start. Who all feels like you're in kind of like a Christmas daze right now? Like you're a little bit sleep deprived, eating a little too much sugar, right? Like we're somewhere in between Christmas and New Year's, and at some point January's coming, we know. I love this time of the year. We talked about this at Christmas, just sweet time with family. My wife and I got to drive back up to Indiana and spend time with both of our families that live around there. New Year's is right around the corner, which means two things. One, my beloved Indiana Hoosiers are gonna do the nation a favor and stomp the Alabama Crimson Tide. It's gonna happen. If they don't, I'm not gonna show up here next Sunday. But secondly, I love New Year's because it's a time when I know so many of us, we're just excited for what's in store. Like we're thinking about 2026. We're already coming up with our New Year's resolutions that are totally gonna crash and burn by February or March statistically. But it's just a sweet time of every time the calendar rolls around, looking back on what God has done and looking forward expectantly to where God's gonna move. And so I know that video kind of already teased this a little bit, but I just wanna brag on God for a second about what's been happening this year here at the Franklin campus. One stat is this that I love. We're in the midst of a 30% growth in weekend attendance. Like every week, yeah, we can clap about that. Like every week as a staff and as volunteers, we meet new families that are moving to the area and they're finding us by Googling us or you're inviting them and they're like, hey, we moved here and we're looking for a church home. And so it is so cool to just see all the new people that are connecting. We have here at the Franklin campus such a strong discipleship culture. 75% of all adults here at our campus are plugged into small groups. Guys, that is so much higher than any other campus. Like, give yourself a hand for that. Like, so good. My favorite, here in 2025, we got to celebrate 27 baptisms here in this room at the Franklin campus. What's so beautiful is that is the most people in a calendar year that have ever been baptized in this building. And when we factor in the reality I talked about 2 weeks ago, that many of us, our ladies here, have been able to be a part of serving at Next Door Recovery up in Nashville, working with ladies, and have been a part of 89 baptisms there. We as a campus in some capacity have been able to walk with 116 people who publicly displayed allegiance to Jesus this year. Can we just thank God? Like, so beautiful. Like, and here's what we need to know, because I think sometimes when we celebrate things like this, it's easy to lose sight of this. Guys, that's not normal. Like on average in the United States every year, about 4,000 churches of all different shapes and sizes close their doors. You know, right now, less than 6% of churches are actually like statistically growing. Most are declining year over year. And so listen, all of this is not based on what we've done or our strategies or our systems or all of us banding together in different ways. Everything we're celebrating at the end of this year is solely because of God, who he is and what he is doing in and through us here in Franklin. So can we just give God the glory? We can't lose sight of that. You know, it's so easy as we're looking towards 2026 and New Year's resolutions, and I'm gonna hack my way to a more efficient or better me, to make things so much about us this time of the year. When the reality is this: we exist as a church to connect people to Jesus and one another, and the way in which that is done is the full force of this church being unleashed to love people one at a time. And our strategy in all of that is one word: it's prayer. And as we close the door on 2025 and we step into 2026, that's the word I want to focus on today: prayer. I know for some of us, when we talk about prayer or we hear a sermon on prayer, we can get a little angsty, right? Because we're like, another reminder that I don't think I'm doing very well in this area of my life, right? Like maybe all of this shame and guilt settle in. Like I don't think I pray enough, or my prayers don't sound as good as like that person in my small group who just seems like a prayer rock star, that every time they open their mouth, it's like all of this flowery big words. And I'm like, that's not in my vocabulary. I don't even know how to pray that way. And we can sense just this feeling of like, we're not doing good in this area, or we're coming up short. However, in one of my favorite books on prayer by a guy named Paul Miller called A Praying Life, he has this killer quote. He says, prayer is simply the medium through which we experience and connect to God. Oddly enough, many people struggle to learn how to pray because they're focusing on praying and not on God. Right? Like we look at prayer as the end instead of it being the means to an end, the end being just a deeper relationship with God. I love the words of a pastor and author named Tyler Staton who grew up here locally in Brentwood. He says this, hey, if you're praying, you're already doing it right. So listen, if you're saying, Bryson, I'm trying to pray, I'm like, no, there's no trying. Like the fact that you're trying, you are praying. That is prayer. Like this should be the most encouraging thing for you in this moment. That just like you wouldn't like systematize a way in which to have conversations with your best friend, prayer is just simply an invitation into aligning our hearts deeper and deeper with our Heavenly Father, who just simply desires for us to sit with him and sense his heart for us and listen to his voice, whether that's moments of quiet in the morning or evening for you, or maybe you're like me, I like to talk out loud. And so to avoid people thinking I'm crazy, like I'll do it on my commutes in and back home on work days. I'll just talk out loud to God in my car. And listen, there's so many different things and methods and modes of prayer that we could talk about. But today, as we look towards 2026 and the vision of where God's leading us, I want to talk specifically about this really big word, intercessory prayer, which literally just means praying for people around us and for the broken world around us that desperately needs Jesus. And we live in a world where, and it's a culture too, that is just so antagonistic to prayer, I think the language is, or maybe apathetic, right? Like for some of us, we know the hashtag thoughts and prayers that are thrown kind of sarcastically into the comment sections on Facebook or Instagram in response to us as Christians, like believing in the power of prayer. And when we see a headline that's devastating, we say, I'm praying over this, and yet people outside of the faith view it as meaningless or empty. Some appeal to what's called the law of averages. It's this idea that, over time, a lot of things end up working out or playing out. Like you might say it's God working in that way. I say it's just nature. There's a relying on human ideologies or systems as solutions to the world's problems. And we just spin our tires on if we get the right systems in place or the right person in office or all of these things, then all of our problems will be fixed. And yet, we all know that we still live in a world where every day tragedy strikes in different ways and new headlines show up and political tensions rip families apart and different people groups are marginalized all over the world and natural disasters hit and children are trafficked and struggling to have food to eat, or at the very least, there's people in your life, like in your neighborhood or your workplace, who, if things don't change, they are heading towards eternal separation from God. And so listen, while the average person on the street might say, I don't really know about prayer, what good does it do? Like we believe as followers of Jesus that prayer has power. Like we follow the one who left heaven and stepped into our world. He walked in our shoes. He experienced suffering and death in the most profound of ways, and yet he walked out the other side victorious. So listen, I don't know about you, but everything that he says, I'm hanging my life on it. And Jesus's life, if you read the scriptures, we're just saturated by prayer. Jesus is the one who, in the words of Luke, often withdrew to the wilderness and prayed. Not only that, but in Matthew 6, he teaches us how to pray in this way: Father, your kingdom come and your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. It's literally this invitation from Jesus for you to call on God's favor, for heaven to just invade this world. That we get to align our hearts to be active participants in where God is just breaking through and life change is taking place, where brokenness is leading to new creation. Like past no longer holding shame, and addictions broken, and sickness healed, and comfort is provided in grief, and loneliness is met with community, and restoration provided in the midst of fractured relationships. I love how one pastor and author puts it: prayer is a relational collaboration with God by which we partner with God to rebend human history back in the direction of his will to his kingdom coming. I don't think there's a greater picture as we turn to 2026 that we could look at in terms of people who staked their lives on the power of prayer than what we see in the book of Acts with the early church. And so if you guys have your Bibles, go ahead and turn to Acts chapter 12. Acts 12, we're gonna start there right in verse 1. And to give you a little context, if you haven't studied Acts or read through it before, the church is just beginning to explode. Like the gospel, the message of Jesus' life, death, and resurrection, it's moving to all of these different people groups. One of the greatest terrorists against the church, a guy named Saul, has had this miraculous experience with Jesus on the way to persecute some Christians. He's now Paul. He's now one of the biggest proponents of the church. Like it seems like everything is just sunshine and rainbows until we pick up in Acts 12, verse 1. It was about this time that King Herod arrested some who belonged to the church, intending to persecute them. If you've read through the Gospels before, you see this name Herod popping up a lot, and it seems like a lot of people share this name of Herod. This is a family line who are the kings over the Jewish people. And what you need to know about the Herods is they're not even Jewish. They're like these puppet kings that have been put in place by the Roman Empire to rule over the Jewish people. So really, the Jewish people don't like them very much. And the Herods are constantly worried about making Rome happy so that they don't lose their jobs or their lives. This Herod in Acts 12 is Herod Agrippa. He's the grandson of the Herod who tried to kill Jesus when Jesus was a little baby. He's best friends with the Roman emperor of the time, Caligula. He's people pleasing all the time to try to like, hey, emperor, look at how good I am. And a really easy target for him to get some wins on the board is to attack the early church. Verse 2, he had James, the brother of John, this is one of the 12 disciples, put to death with the sword. And when he saw that this was met with approval amongst the Jews, he proceeded to seize Peter also. This happened during the festival of unleavened bread. After arresting him, he put him in prison, handing him over to be guarded by 4 squads of 4 soldiers each. Herod intended to bring him, Peter, out for public trial after the Passover, and so Peter was kept in prison. I think sometimes when we're reading scripture, it's really easy to kind of just read the words on the page and lose sight of maybe some of the emotion that's present. I want us to go back to verse 2 and read these words again. He, Herod, had James, the brother of John, put to death with the sword. Guys, this is 7 Greek words from Luke to describe the death of the first disciple outside of Judas. And you wonder, like, why is Luke so short in this moment? Like, that's all he gives us, and then he moves on. And I almost wonder that as he's penning this account in Acts, if he's just overcome with these emotions. Like maybe he thinks back on all of the prayer gatherings that the church had, like, Lord, please save James, please set James free, and all of this petitioning to God, and yet it all ends with James being beheaded. All of those prayers for James seemingly completely unanswered. I wonder if Luke is maybe thinking about John, one of the other disciples, James's brother. And maybe whether from James's or John's heart or the heart of those in the church, the questions of God, where are you? Like, why didn't you show up? And here's what I know. I know for many of us in this room, like there's some Jameses that have been beheaded in our lives. Like there's some prayers that as we're coming to the end of 2025, whether it was this year or earlier in our life, that we look back on and we're like, I feel like God didn't listen, or God was silent, or God didn't show up. And we're met with all of these different emotions of pain and heartbreak and questions of why. And to be honest, like Luke doesn't even give us a chance to sit in that, because all of a sudden he's like, hey, guess what? And Peter could be next. Like Peter's now arrested. He's been at the forefront of everything that the Holy Spirit has been doing in the church. And now it's just a matter of time. He's in prison tonight. The very next morning, he's probably going to get his head cut off as well. It's a situation that's seemingly beyond anyone's ability to change. Like there's nobody who's cunning or skilled enough to break Peter out of prison. Like, I don't think anyone has the right connections in this moment to pull the strings to get Peter released. Like, it's this desperation, this discouragement. Like, I wonder how easy it would have been for the church to just slip into this apathy of like, hey, I guess we could pray for Peter, but God didn't answer our prayers for James, so why would he show up with Peter? And yet, look at how verse 5 ends. But the church was earnestly praying to God for him. And to be honest, I think if we all opened up a Bible for the very first time, and this is the only passage we've ever read, I think we would laugh at this or feel sorry for the church. Like, oh, you guys, I'm so sorry. Your prayers weren't answered and you're trying that again? And yet, even in the midst of the pain and the brokenness, the church is clinging to the relationship and the faith and the hope that they have in the one who Jesus has said over and over and over again is a loving Father, regardless of the circumstances that we're experiencing. I love this quote. Someone paraphrased it this way: lost in the background of the action sequences and miraculous montages of Acts is this: a community that gathered to pray even after they had tried it once before, only to watch darkness win, at least from their point of view. They kept on praying in the face of unanswered prayer. I want to tell you about one of my friends up at the Indiana campus, a guy named Don Jay. Back in 2021, he was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer that was just inoperable, like maybe months to live. And what you need to know about Don Jay, when he was younger, his dad experienced an accident where he became permanently disabled and his mom passed away. And so as a little boy, Don Jay came to this conclusion of, I think I love God, but I don't think he cares about me or listens to my prayers. Like maybe in a general sense he takes care of me, but I don't think he intimately cares for me. And so all of a sudden when a cancer diagnosis comes, here's just yet another thing of, I guess we can pray for this, but I don't know what good it'll do. And yet, even in the midst of those emotions, the church, in the words of Acts, was earnestly praying. People like Jason and Matt and Allison and Bob and Sherry and Mike and Kim and Karen and Chris and us as a staff team. One of my other friends at the Indiana campus, a lady named PJ, was on Don Jay's prayer list. And she's just known around our Indiana campus as this kind of fervent prayer warrior. And there would be these moments in the middle of the night where she would be woken up every night at 3:30 a.m. And she doesn't know why she's awake in that moment. So she just thinks, you know what, maybe God woke me up to pray for Don Jay. And so she would start praying and praying just that God would move in his life in powerful ways. What she didn't know and what Don Jay didn't know is that oftentimes on those very same nights, Don Jay would wake up at about the same exact time. And he would have these horrible panic attacks of just the emotions of what he's going through. And then all of a sudden he would be met with this supernatural wave of peace out of nowhere. What's really beautiful is 3 months after diagnosis, Don Jay went in for a checkup without any chemotherapy started, and the cancer was completely gone from his body. How wild is that? Don Jay put it this way: some might say that those 3 months I should wish I never had, but for me, those are 3 months I will deeply cherish forever. Prayers heal in so many ways, and after 40 years of treating prayers like something on a Christian to-do list, I now fully embrace the power of prayer. At the same time as that story's playing out, we as a church family are walking with another family, a couple, Roger and Rochelle, as she has cancer. And where Don Jay was healed, I remember day after day after day visiting Rochelle in the hospital as she continued to deteriorate, and we fervently prayed and we sang hymns and we pleaded God to move in her life in a miraculous way. And yet Rochelle passed from her cancer. She left behind 2 daughters with their husbands and grandkids and her husband who dearly loves her. And I remember wrapping my arms around him as tears streamed down her face. And the question in that moment becomes, why was Don J miraculously healed, but Rochelle was not? God, why was James beheaded when you literally have split the Red Sea? Like, why do some things play out in our lives and others don't in response to prayer? And the honest response for all of us is this, like, I don't know. Like, there are so many realities this side of eternity that we will never fully understand or see the perspective of. And yet, I've heard it said this way before: I don't know and I never could understand everything about God, but I can trust the God who's revealed in Jesus. The God who has never looked down on suffering from a lofty throne, but has always looked into the eyes of the suffering from level ground. I can trust the God who refuses to offer platitudes from a safe distance. The God who descends into the mess with me. The God who we just studied 2 weeks ago, laboring in the garden. If there's any other way, can we do that? Because I don't want to go through this. C.S. Lewis puts it this way: out of the mouth of a demon in his classic, The Screwtape Letters, Satan and his minions, our cause is never more in danger than when a human no longer desiring but still intending to do our enemy, God's will, looks around upon a universe from which every trace of God seems to have vanished and asks why he has been forsaken and yet still obeys. James was beheaded. Peter might be next. But the church was earnestly praying to God. And I just wonder what it would look like for us as a church in 2026, that regardless of the circumstances or the outcomes of our prayers in the past, we keep praying. That when the diagnosis seems grim, the church earnestly prays. When the boss includes you in the layoffs, the church earnestly prays. When the marriage heads towards divorce, the church earnestly prays. When the family prodigal seems further from God than ever, the church earnestly prays. When war tears across our globe, the church earnestly prays. The power of intercessory prayer is that we are reminded, as we said up top, that nothing comes about from our own power or strength or will. We are placed in this place of powerlessness and dependency on God, trusting in the one that even when outcomes take place that break our heart, we will continue to throw ourselves on the one who has proven his track record throughout history and through a cross and a resurrection as the faithful one. Check out what happens in verse 6. The night before Herod was to bring him, Peter, to trial where he would be beheaded, Peter was sleeping between 2 soldiers bound with 2 chains, and sentries stood guard at the entrance. Suddenly an angel of the Lord appeared and a light shone in the cell. He, the angel, struck Peter on the side and woke him up. "Hey, quick, get up," he said, and the chains fell off Peter's wrists. You know, unlike Don J and PJ in the middle of the night at 3:30, like Peter is sleeping like a baby. In fact, like this word struck, it literally means what you think it means. Like the angel literally just socks Peter in the side. And as comical as that is, here's the beauty in this. Like this is the night before Peter is probably gonna be put to death. And instead of him lying awake, just racked with anxiety all night, he is somehow like asleep. And I think it's this really beautiful picture of even though Peter still sits physically in prison, he is somehow mentally and emotionally and spiritually free in this moment. And it makes me wonder if the prayers in that little prayer gathering that night were already being answered in ways they didn't even know. It makes you wonder how many times in waiting for the fullness of our prayers do we miss the small little blessings or the reminders along the way that God's with us. Maybe it's the neighbor who rejects Christianity and knows how and what you believe and says, I'm not into that. But finally they accept an invitation to come over just for dinner to get to know you a little bit more. Maybe it's the husband who is battling pornography for much of his life, and then all of a sudden he begins to walk in sobriety one day at a time. Maybe it's the family prodigal who finally returns your call just to simply say, hey, what's up? The story goes on, verse 8. Then the angel said to him, hey, put on your clothes and sandals. And Peter did so. Wrap your cloak around you and follow me, the angel told him. And Peter followed him out of the prison, but he had no idea that what the angel was doing was really happening. He thought he was seeing a vision. It makes me wonder if Peter's like, man, I knew I shouldn't have had that stale bread the guards gave me. Like, what kind of dream is this? They passed the first and second guards and came to the iron gate leading into the city. It opened for them by itself, and they went through it. And when they had walked the length of one street, suddenly the angel left him. And then Peter came to himself and said, now I know without a doubt that the Lord has sent his angel and rescued me from Herod's clutches and from everything the Jewish people were hoping would happen. And when this dawned on him, he went to the house of Mary, the mother of John, also called Mark, where many people had gathered and were praying. So Peter's out of prison now. He's heading to the house where this prayer gathering has been taking place, where they've been praying for him to be released. Peter knocked at the outer entrance, and a servant named Rhoda came to answer the door. And when she recognized Peter's voice, she was so overjoyed that she threw open the door and welcomed him in. Oh, wait, no. She ran back without opening it and exclaimed, hey, Peter's at the door. And the church was thrilled and they praised God. No, wait, no, you're out of your mind, they told her. And when she kept insisting that it was so, they said, it must be his angel. It's almost like they're saying, hey, silly Rhoda, leave us alone. Can't you see we're praying for Peter to get out of jail? Like, God, please set Peter free from jail. And I love how Luke describes Peter kept knocking. It makes you wonder if Peter's just outside like, real funny guys, please let me in. Like they could come find me. I don't know if I'm gonna get out of twice. Like God literally busted Peter out of jail and now he can't get into the prayer gathering, praying for his release. When they opened the door and saw him, they were astonished. And Peter motioned with his hand for them to be quiet, and he described how the Lord had brought him out of prison. Hey, tell James, Jesus' brother James, and the other brothers and sisters about this, he said. And then he left for another place. It's a really funny and kind of weird and comedic kind of story and how that plays out in the end. But I don't know about you, I find it deeply encouraging. Because we look at the early church as just these spiritual giants in the faith, and yet, even in a prayer gathering, there's a little bit of skepticism and a little bit of doubt of, I'm praying this, but I don't know if God's really gonna come through. Pastor Warren Wiersbe put it this way once: we must face the fact that even in the most fervent of prayer meetings, there's sometimes a spirit of doubt and unbelief. And I hope that encourages us, because in the words of Philippians, like we are all a work in progress. Like God is carrying out a good work in us and he will see it to completion. And even in the moments when we're stumbling and bumbling and inconsistent in our faith in the midst of emotions and doubts, even in those moments when our faith feels like as small as a mustard seed, that God moves in really gracious and powerful ways. And it's that prayer, that type of faith, even in the smallest of ways in the early church, that literally led to chains being broken and prison doors opening and Rome flipped on its head. And listen, Franklin Campus, I believe it's those same kind of prayers and that same kind of faith that can transform households and lives and communities for the gospel and flip Middle Tennessee on its head. And so if I could ask you a question this morning in the midst of prayer in relation to this story in Acts 12, where's your headspace at? For some of us, we're fixated on the character of James for good reasons. Like maybe as 2025 is ending, we're struggling with feeling like God has not heard my prayers. He doesn't see me. Does he even care about me, right? And that's led to just feeling ignored and overlooked. Some of us, our minds are on Herod. Like we think about, man, how terrible of a character in this story. And yet how many Herods are around us in this world? People that desperately need to know Jesus. And if they would just come to a place of trusting in him, like we see from Saul to Paul, lives could be transformed. For some of us, we're around the character of Peter, that maybe it's in our own life or the life of someone around us or just an area of our community here in Williamson County that we just say, God, we need you to move in a miraculous way to bring about change, because it doesn't feel like anything is gonna work here unless you're behind this. I know for so many of us, we feel like giving up as another year stretches before us, and yet I wanna remind us again, we follow in the footsteps of the one who left heaven and came to earth. And he walked in our shoes and he experienced suffering and grief and persecution in the most just powerful and visceral of ways. And he died and he walked out the other side victorious. And prayer saturates his life. And we have 2,000 years of our brothers and sisters in the faith praying for God's will to be done on earth as it is in heaven, as we have seen the church and the gospel of Jesus Christ touch the corners of the globe and bring about transformation and healing and hope. And so the invitation as we look to 2026 and we pray for God to move in and through our body of believers here in Franklin is this: God, what do you want to do in my heart in 2026 in regards to prayer? And maybe for some of us is that connection to James in the story is at the forefront of our minds. Our prayer and our hope is that we would move from frustration and apathy and pain around unanswered prayer to this feeling of trust fueled by hope, not in the why of what happened, but in the what and the who. As in, what do I know to be true, even in the midst of what I'm going on, in the who that I am staking my life on, because his track record has proven him. For some of us, maybe it's in that relation to Herod that we have people in our lives that we're like, man, I don't think God can ever get a hold of them. And we see this with Herod, right? He's struck down dead a few chapters later. And yet, in the words of Paul in Ephesians 6, our battle is not against flesh and blood, against the rulers and the authorities in the heavenly realms. Like the people in our lives that we view as the enemy are just captives and victims of the real enemy. They're image bearers of God that desperately need to know Jesus. Like, what if in 2026, the person that you think would never have anything to do with Jesus is a person that you're standing next to in the baptistry as they say yes to Jesus? Think about in this story, the real prisoner wasn't Peter, it was Herod. He was spiritually in prison. For those of us in the camp of Peter, through prayer and our hopelessness, maybe this could be moved towards a confidence and a gratitude towards God as he shows up in miraculous ways, even in the smallest of ways, like comfort in the midst of our friend being beheaded. That maybe paves way to even greater realities. And so the question, it's not whether God's gonna move in 2026. It's, do we trust him? And will we join with his heart in prayer as he moves powerfully in Middle Tennessee? And some ways I want to invite you into that we're going to hear about the next few weeks. One, we're kicking off a 21 days of prayer and fasting as a church across all our campuses. If you want to pull out your phones now and text the word 21 days to 733-733, 21 days to 733-733. We as a church are going to be receiving prayer prompts every single day that roots you in scripture, that roots you in something that is near and dear to the heart of our church, where you can sit with the Lord in quiet and prayer. There's resources online that we'll be sharing in email that teach you what fasting can look like in your life as you align your heart with God. We're going to continue to lean more and more into our prayer spaces here in this room. In fact, Brian's about to lead us through an exercise in which we just come to the Lord with prayers, and we're trying to create a space in this worship center for not just worship and teaching, but for prayer to take place during the week, during the service, as we're lifting each other up in prayer. the first Sunday of every month from 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. here at the Franklin campus, we have a prayer huddle where we meet in the next step room. And I want to invite you to that. The next one is just this next week on January 4th. We gather together in that room from 8 to 9 and we lift up prayers in our church and in our community. Like, let these be hopefully and prayerfully little invitations to help you step more and more into prayer in 2026. To kind of end, I stumbled upon an article the other day by CBN, the Christian Broadcasting Network, that was simply titled this: Christians flock to Nashville. Is Nashville the next revival hub? And some of us were like, great, more traffic. Others of us, that gets us really excited. Like, what God could do in Middle Tennessee could be immeasurably more, in the words of Paul in Ephesians 3, immeasurably more than anything we could ask or hope or imagine. And so the invitation is, let's be a church that prays earnestly, that prays expectantly, that prays faithfully, that understands that nothing good that happens around here is because of us. It's only because of God. And I can't wait to see what he's gonna do in 2026.